Professor Sierra Claire also joins me, foreign policy analyst, and is joining me from California to help us understand the American view in it. Professor Sierra, first, welcome to India Today. Thank you for speaking to us. Barely few hours ago, we had Vice President J.D. Vance, for example, saying we have all the tools in our toolkit. Many thought if it's a reference to the nuke weapons and that everything can be used and that the White House and the president will decide. 12 hours later, we have a ceasefire that is being announced for the next 2 weeks. Pakistan is the mediator. What do you believe possibly happened, and is this for the good?
Yeah, I think it's a very positive development. I think that, people say President Trump needed an off-ramp. I don't think that's the case, but I do think it's a good thing that we have a ceasefire, and I think President Trump thinks it's a good thing. The Iranians have done the right thing for their country. In terms of what happened, I think, number one, President Trump's threats were credible. That was a big factor. As you said,
go ahead.
China,
yes.
May have the mediators.
All right. Professor, we'll just get back to you. We'll get that communication sorted with this. Adrian, if you can hear me on this, where do you see the Friday expected negotiation going? Because from where I look at it, it's USA very clear on their conditions. Extremely opposing to that is the Iranian regime with their specific conditions as well. What role can Pakistan possibly play here?
Well, it's almost rewind the clock where Pakistan is trying to be the mediator. I personally don't trust them as mediators in situations. I think that got us into
why do you say that?
Well, if you look at the war in Afghanistan, they played a double game against us. They gave the Taliban an off-season every single year, rearmed them, regrouped them, and then sent them back across the border. So Pakistan, they're trying to make themselves relevant again. You look at Qatar has basically supplanted them as being the one country that has been used as a cutout to talk to bad actors in the region, such as Hamas, such as the Islamic Republic. But when the Islamic Republic started lobbing missiles at Qatar, that all changed and Pakistan entered the fray. And it also pulls Turkey. They're supposedly working behind the scenes as well on this. And what does Turkey have to gain from this? And I look at Turkey, I see Erdogan, and what he has to gain is a extremely weakened Islamic Republic, not regime change, but a weakened Islamic Republic, so we can still launder money through there, use their illicit economy, etc. So that's what Erdogan's looking at. But Pakistan, we've been burnt by them too many times to play this game again.
Well, that's a fair point, and India, of course, is fully aware what Pakistan is about. I hope the US administration knows what it is doing, using Islamabad to play a mediator role, because Pakistan Prime Minister and Field Marshal Asim Munir are already prepping themselves up as how they have been able to manage to reach this specific decision. So will it be a puppet, postman, or, well, a real mediator in bringing peace via Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif? Can Pakistan, which has been a hub of terror, possibly bring peace in West Asia? Professor Sierra Claire, a foreign policy analyst, continues to be with us. With the developments that you see, do you see this as a ceasefire? Temporary, permanent? Do you think it can bring some peace to the region? Because the world is watching this. It's not just about 2 or 3 countries.
Yeah, I think the ceasefire is a very positive development. I think that, as long as the Iranian regime follows through on opening the strait as they've said they would, the ceasefire will hold. In terms of whether it can lead to permanent peace, there's a very good chance that it can. The sticking point for the United States side is going to be the enriched uranium. So there definitely could be a problem with that. But I'm hoping that, the fact that the ceasefire has existed is a positive sign that the Iranians are ready to take this seriously.
We're looking at how the developments have been. Can you help me understand the view from the American public? Are they in support of the war? Are they uncertain? The mixed messaging of Donald Trump has a direct impact on America as well. The skyrocketing prices, the family members from the armed forces who are waiting to know what kind of ground invasion is being planned, all that and more.
Well, I think it's very unlikely that we would see a ground invasion from the US. We've shown our military capability, and the American people have seen that as well, that we're able to accomplish our goals, with an air and naval campaign. In terms of the public sentiments, a lot of Americans don't like being at war, and that's understandable. President Trump's approval rating hasn't suffered, very much really at all. And a lot of people as well do support the war just because of how well known Iran is of chanting death to America. And, many Americans are familiar with that versus some other conflicts that we've been in where it was a place that Americans had basically never heard of before. So I think that affects things. But I think the process in America is the national security process, and presidents have in the past, and including President Trump, have to face unpopular decisions, but it's for the sake of national security of the country, and they can't always reveal all the classified information, to the public, and that's just something that presidents have to face.
Stay on with me, please. Adrian, I want you to also help us understand this. We had the visuals of the U.S. Navy fighter jets taking off from the USS Abraham Lincoln barely a few hours ago, and that Operation Epic Fury was still on. We have a very strong statement of threat coming in directly from the U.S. president, and we know that the situation is building up. There were bombardments on the Kharg Island, on the railway tracks. IDF was putting out precautionary warnings for Iranians to step back from the railway tracks. And then comes in a ceasefire. Do you think they were only about pressure tactics earlier, or there was an escalation and either Iran or the USA realized they cannot go ahead with it, or both realized it?
Well, I actually think that the regime is looking for some type of stalling tactic, some type of tactic to maintain survival with some type of rump government, what they have, not to change the entire regime, to keep the structure in place, but to save what they have. We look at them as absolute zealots, and leaders like Ali Khamenei, Moshtaba, the IRGC, they are zealots, but they're equal part gangsters, criminals, siphoning money off the people. So a lot of them care just as much about their bank accounts. So could it be them taking this tactical retreat for the strategic long-term objective? In America, we just think in 200-something years, hundreds of years, 50 years, election cycles. The Islamic Republic, Iranians, they look at it in, thousands of years. So.
Do you want to elaborate on that? Are you referring to how the ideology works here in how they are looking at these attacks?
Well, the regime, they have long believed that they've been impervious to this. I don't know if they convinced themselves that they were stronger than they actually were, but they've shown that, they never had a conventional military. They were always prone and susceptible to attacks. It was just whether anybody had the political will to actually carry out on that action. And
when you said Iran thinks thousands of years while we think election cycles.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's with Trump, and that's exactly what he was thinking is, the nuclear breakout time for the Islamic Republic was before the 12-day war was down to 4 to 6 months, and that's why they needed to hit them. And then now the premise for going in this second time was, again, they weren't giving up on the 400 kilograms buried at Isfahan and the enrichment facility at Pickaxe Mountain. So again, those needed to be hit. But the regime, this regime is about survival. And
it has managed to pull it off. Well, let's be honest, because despite the sanctions,
Yes. It has, but it's at its weakest point when you look at the state of Hezbollah, when you look at the state of this campaign against this regime. It's been complete degradation of not just battlefield degradation, but regime's command structure, the intelligence apparatus, internal security, strategic decision-making. It's all gone. So
But don't you
that's
also
why.
think, did the USA underestimate Iran? And I'll take that question to Professor Sierra as well, that Iran managed to at least show that despite sanctions, despite restrictions, they've been able to at least hold it on for so many days.
Well, I don't know that the U.S. underestimated Iran. I think that there was retaliation from Iran that was probably built into the U.S. military planning. You know, we also have to look at the fact that the U.S. military has had contingency plans about Iran probably for the past 47 years. So, of course, this is a new, modern day conflict, but I'm sure there was anticipation there.
How do you see, Professor Sierra, the response in the region? I'm curious to know what Lebanon, of course, while is in support of Iran, but what about neighboring countries that were in some way hit or associated with the conflict? The UAE, Saudi Arabia, other nations as well in the neighborhood, in West Asia, whether it's Bahrain, whether it's Jordan. These are all some way interconnected, and there have been tensions in this region already. Where do you see West Asia going from here, especially as there is ceasefire for at least the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think this conflict has really highlighted, especially for the Gulf countries, the need for loyalty from their partners. And so I don't know how we'll see that play out once the hostilities are fully over. But I think, especially right now during this period, and the fact that they are wanting to invest more in security for their infrastructure, they realize that that's a risk. And of course, they've grown closer to the United States over this conflict as well. But I think it's just highlighted, for those states, they're small states and they invest a lot, and they kind of use investments to develop their partnerships. And they've kind of realized that they really have to get some loyalty back from a lot of their partners.
Adrian, you want to respond to that I was asking? That do you think Iran's retaliation has possibly caught the Americans by surprise as well, or they knew this was the time? Because from where we also see it, it looks like for 40 days, the Iranian regime has been able to at least keep the Americans at bay.
No, I think Professor Claire's spot on there. They said they were going to attack all the neighboring countries, and they did. When the regime says and threatens, if they're going to do something, they generally are going to do it. And, we've seen them attack after the 12-day war. They launched a missile at Qatar. UAE has been in the crosshairs for gosh, since 2017, 2018, 2016 with the Houthis. There's been drones launched at them, but they've become very adept at that, at intercepting them. And I think the UAE is going to be very disappointed with this decision, and some of the countries such as that have been targeted in this, Bahrain as well. Saudis kind of been riding the fence, but recently they've been saying, go on and finish the job here. So that was a miscalculation by the Islamic Republic, which really started on October 7th, 2023, was to launch at all the neighboring states, including Qatar, and to pull over everybody to your side, except for Oman, which continues to be an outlier in this.
Professor Sierra, do you think that this is time for the Gulf nations to take a decision? There, of course, are assets, but some of them are neutral in their approach as well. But do you think this is the time they have to decide whether they want to stand with Iran or the regime that is the Khamenei's, or do you think they need to stand with a democratic country like a Western country like the USA, or even for that matter, Israel? Or do you think some countries here in the region can manage to stay neutral?
I don't know if I would use the word neutral. I think that what's happened is they've realized that their relationship with Iran, or with, these kind of terrorist organizations that Iran funds, does not protect them when push comes to shove. And so they're going to invest more in security. They're going to work more with partners who can provide strong security, like the U.S. and Israel. But I don't know that they're going to sever ties, or, they're going to completely go to be USA all the way either. So I think there's a gradation in between staying completely neutral and, going all the way to the USA side.
How do you look at the role of Pakistan on Friday? What do you expect from Pakistan? Because from where we see it, I don't know how much of help can Pakistan really put on the table, but they have also sent out a proposal. They're making it look like they're the big mediators. Do you think Iran will trust Pakistan as much as the Trump administration is putting that trust or onus or perhaps some assistance on Pakistan?
Well, I think Pakistan's role has been to be the go-between between the U.S. and Iran. And when this gets into some bigger questions, as we're talking about right now about the rest of the region, I don't know how Pakistan may be able to manage that part of it. And so there are other back channels, I believe, that, may have been involved in this process and may come in to being involved in this process. So we might see this open up to some additional mediators, but that's not to say that Pakistan, didn't play an important role here just between the US and Iran. But in terms of their larger relationships, we might need a country that has more relationships throughout the region.
Please stay on with me because the White House has put out a statement and I want to bring it to the viewer. That's the big news coming in. White House has called the ceasefire victory for the United States of America. A statement from the White House says, and I quote it here, "This is a victory for the United States that President Trump and our incredible military made happen. From the very beginning of the Operation Epic Fury, President Trump estimated this would be about a 4 to 6 week operation. Thanks to the unbelievable capabilities of our warriors, we have achieved and exceeded our core military objectives in 38 days. More on that tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, which of course would be Indian Standard Time evening, that there is going to be, as we know, a certain press briefing. The success of our military created maximum leverage, allowing President Trump and the team to engage in tough negotiations that have now created the opening of a diplomatic solution and a long-term peace. President Trump got the Strait of Hormuz reopened." So this is what the White House is saying, that it's because of President Trump and his efforts that Strait of Hormuz has reopened. Never underestimate President Trump's ability to successfully advance America's interests and broker peace. I wonder if it's written from the White House or from the president itself, going by some of the words used. However, I'll take that to you, Adrian, that the victory that is being claimed right now, do you think this is too soon? Do you think this is, again, a psychological warfare by the USA to show that they have their objectives achieved?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right on that. It is too soon. It could be seen as psychological warfare. As I mentioned before, we've seen the two plans, what two countries expect. I still don't see where the common ground is. If he's declaring this as a victory, it would mean that the regime played their last piece of leverage, which was the Strait of Hormuz and blocking it off. And then Donald Trump blinked and they won. So I really don't think this is over. In the 10-point plan that the Iranians are putting forward, the regime, it includes that both Oman and the Islamic Republic will the ones, navigating ships through the strait when this is international waters. That's not the way it's supposed to be. So there's one hurdle that you need to get over immediately.
Professor Sierra, there was a video during the Easter celebrations where Donald Trump had said, "Cannot leave the nukes in the hands of lunatics." He used that word for the Iranian regime. Do you think that it's a step back to say, all right, but Strait of Hormuz has reopened and that's about it? How do you then go about an approach of a US president on one side saying, we'll go all out, and then adding, there is a ceasefire, we are negotiating?
Well, I think the fact that President Trump's threats were credible is what brought us to a ceasefire, because that's unfortunately what the Iranian regime responds to. Now, when he says they're lunatic, we can't leave it in the hands of lunatics. There are hardline people in the IRGC that may not necessarily be the same people that President Trump is dealing with and negotiating with, where, wow, now we've found someone reasonable, which is good. But this country is very volatile right now. The IRGC could still have control over the uranium. So that's obviously an important part, and we don't want to let that fall into the wrong hands.
I'll also ask my team to put out the pictures of the celebrations on the streets of Tehran. At about 4:30 a.m., there were already women primarily, even though in Wales, but with the flag. They were out and about, they were celebrating. We'll try and hear from them. But Professor Sierra, I found that very interesting. We know that women have suffered immensely when it comes to the Khamenei regime, especially whether it's about their rights, freedom, and more. There have been protests against the regime, and yet there is a certain celebration that we see today. We'll try and get more clarity on what kind of celebration was there. Was it a sigh of relief against any destruction? How do you think this is turning around? Do you think people are beginning to support the Khameneis, or they're just relieved that the war is not at least happening for the next 2 weeks?
Well, I think that the Iranian people and the women, especially who've suffered under this regime, want to have a country left to rebuild, and their future is going to be decided by them. And there may still be ways that the United States can support the Iranian people even after the ceasefire agreement. But I think that if they are celebrating, or it's not regime propaganda or whatever, it's because they have a country that they can start to rebuild and actually see a future for.
Adrian, as we look at these visuals, what do you make of it? With your years of expertise on West Asia, these same streets have witnessed protests as well, public hanging, executions, kidnappings, all of that and more. And today, it appears that there are people on the ground at least celebrating the truce. Do you think that the public narrative is changing, or do you think this is a sigh of relief? I'm trying to understand the sentiment here on the ground, because that can then also decide if the regime stays or goes.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is the regime should turn the internet on so we can actually see what type of celebrations are happening where. Or when I see a bunch of people waving the Islamic Republic's flag, dressed in the black chador, which the Iranian women are completely against. If you survey 90 million of the population, take half of them, maybe 5% will agree to those type of wearing that and the type of life that they live, which is being repressed. And the Iranian people, the Iranian women, this is not representative of what you would expect. The one thing is, it's so difficult to get reporting because we're relying on regime propaganda or CENTCOM for our details. And so it's just, it's a lot of fog of war. But when you see a video like that, that screams regime to me.
Well, for sure that it's not easy to be able to report from Iran, but importantly, what exactly is the public view? It's also difficult to gauge that, but we'll try and get as many possible details from our sources on the ground to understand what's unfolding in Iran. Please stay on with me, because let's discuss Pakistan. And for that, I want our viewer to take a look at what exactly is going to be the role of Pakistan, at least going by the social media statements, both from White House and Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's handle, that Pakistan did facilitate back-channel talks between both sides. Requested US President Donald Trump for a 14-day ceasefire. This is what Shehbaz Sharif is also claiming. Acted as a mediator between America and Iran. Coordinated regional diplomacy with other players too. This is again from the statements, or at least 2 to 3 statements that have come in on social media site X by Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. Peace talks likely in Islamabad is what our sources are telling us. Professor Sierra, when you look at this, do you think that Pakistan possibly is the choice to go when it has its own history that is extremely questionable? It's been a terror hub against India, against neighbor nations, and for it to be chosen by the USA clearly and supported by Iran to become a neutral location.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pakistan, for this and for the fact that it is a neutral location, I mean, that's a fact. It's not in Iran and it's not in the US. So if that's working for now.
Yes, go ahead, Professor. That's the visual coming in from Iran, but finish your point.
if that's working for now, let's not derail the ceasefire talks over the location. But as you said, Pakistan has their own issues with terrorism, and that is not something that is trustworthy, especially to the Gulf states who have suffered with the Iranian regime terrorism. So, as I said before, there might be other players that come in later as we get deeper into this. We already know China's been part of this.
Yes.
So we'll see, how these other players might start influencing things.
China and Russia decided to veto against a resolution that was brought in the United Nations Security Council by Bahrain. It was to open the Strait of Hormuz. That Russia and China vetoed against it, and therefore it's reflective of where the support lies. These are the latest visuals coming in from Iran on your screen. These early morning visuals, women, men, they're out and about with the flags, and they are of course celebrating at least, which is a truce, because there could have been heavy bombardments otherwise in different areas. But whether this is a regime propaganda to show that there is victory for Khamenei regime, or perhaps this is just reflective of a public sentiment, it's difficult to understand that categorically, considering how restrictive Iran is. But I want to bring in our guests here. Adrian, first to you. The 10-point peace proposal by Iran, which includes non-aggression, control over Strait of Hormuz, acceptance of Iran's uranium enrichment, lifting primary sanctions as more, are in complete difference to what the USA has been asking for. So even 40 days later, I am not clear. What does the US president really has been asking for? Was it the Strait of Hormuz? Was it uranium enrichment? Was it to end the war? Was it to overthrow the regime? All of this, I think, has confused even Iran. So they have also put forth this 10-point agenda. What is your assessment? What do you think the US president really needed?
What the US president really needed was, one, the nuclear program.
Yes.
That was, the regime tried to confine us to the nuclear program so we would look past all their barbaric activity, terrorism, how they treat their own population, human rights abuses, etc., proxies, you name it. So they tried to reduce us to a nuclear file, and Trump put him back in the nuclear file. And after the 12-day war, it just wasn't finished. And now, again, to claim victory, as you said, it's too early because, again, that nuclear stockpile is still, it's probably buried somewhere under Isfahan, but it's still 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. The ballistic missiles, that was another issue. There was also a stipulation about Israel's war with Lebanon and what's going on with that. So it really throws a giant kind of, the objectives in Trump, what I have not stated objectives have been from the beginning, they just don't meet. And that's why I think this is temporary. Because if you know the regime, they are steadfast. They will negotiate, but again.
All right, huge news coming in. We have the names. We have the clear identities about who are going to be part of that discussion in Islamabad on Friday. Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, son-in-law Jared Kushner, and Vice President J.D. Vance, who was on standby, will be attending the Pakistan talks. I'm quoting from the American news station CNN. That's the big news coming in. I reiterate the three names that have come in. Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, son-in-law Jared Kushner, Vice President J.D. Vance will be attending the Pakistan talks. They will be the one mediating on behalf of the United States of America or Trump administration with the Iranian officials to be able to reach a certain peace. Professor Sierra Claire continues to be with us. Also, Adrian Kalmal has been with us with his views. Joining me now is Terista Schaffer, ex-diplomat and also is a writer, especially tracking India, South Asia. First to you then, Terista, you tell me. Do you think these are good options as representatives? Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, and J.D. Vance.
They are certainly close to the president. There's no question that they have his ear. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner have many, many other responsibilities. They seem to be special envoys to everything. This is not a task that I think can be effectively carried out by somebody who has 4 or 5 other special envoy assignments at the same time. You have to immerse yourself in a problem in order to to deal with it effectively. I understand from some material that was reported in the New York Times just later today that J.D. Vance had told President Trump that he thought that the Iran war was a bad idea. But he said, if you decide you're going to do it, I will support you. So that's the only context I can give you for his selection as part of this team. He's obviously a very senior personality. How much time he's had to really delve into the issues, I can't say. I don't know.
How do you see the role of Pakistan here? A country already has a checkered history when it comes to being a terror hub in the region and then becomes a location for mediation talks on ceasefire between the USA and Iran.
Well, I don't find that particularly contradictory, actually. Pakistan has had a terrorism problem with India. Or I should put it the other way around. India has had a terrorism problem with Pakistan. But that would not prevent them from trying to make it possible for the U.S. and Iran to communicate together. I think they may actually be quite well suited to that role.
Why do you say that?
They have an important relationship with Iran, so that they have some reason to hope that the Iranians might take them seriously.
And whether they'll be seen by Iran possibly as a certain puppet or a postman. It's going to be interesting how Pakistan plays this role. Please stay on with me, because three names that have come in: Vice President J.D. Vance, Jared Kushner, and Steve Witkoff as well. And I want to discuss that further. These names are very interesting. But meanwhile, it's the ceasefire announcement that is coming. Three possible endgames here. There could be a breakthrough deal that will be finalized, already finalized, or is in the last leg. 10-point proposal forms the basis of that agreement. But these 10 points are completely opposite for Iran and for the USA. Iran opens the Strait of Hormuz. America and Iran will finalize a long-term peace framework. Can they do it? They've been arch rivals since the 80s. There have been sanctions of international proportions that have been placed on Iran. There have been death to America, death to Israel, chanting that have been done since childhood for many in Iran. And therefore, what that long-term peace framework will be remains to be seen. General de-escalation already has started, but it remains to be seen if they can carry it through. The talks right now are dragging with no final agreement. Iran's nuclear program is still the sore point. It's still very strong for Iran. USA hasn't been able to take away their enriched uranium. Ceasefire has been extended, but there's no clear outcome yet. So there is a trust deficit that exists on both sides between Iran and the USA, Israel as well. Now, what if the war resumes after a 2-week pause? Or even during these next 14 days. Iran, if it fails to meet the ceasefire conditions, Strait of Hormuz will remain disrupted. That means the supply chain will be affected across the world. America and Israel can resume their military strikes. They already have troops and, of course, weapons already deployed in the region. The region again can slide back into escalation. This is not just about Iran and Israel. This is about neighborhood countries as well. Adrian, I want quickly from you a word on how Jared Kushner has been also included in the list of the three names, and that question to Professor Sierra as well, because I find the names interesting. What do you make of these names, especially Kushner?
Yeah, Kushner's interesting. He was always president. I'm sorry, was I talking over somebody or my?
Go ahead. Finish your point, sir.
Kushner, he was thrown in the last round of the negotiations with the regime over the before this all kicked off. The one interesting person that I would say is J.D. Vance, is having him included in the equation. He comes from what you would call the isolationist wing of the Republican Party. I would say extreme isolationist. If I think the most serious person, the person that understands this, and you can juggle many balls at once, and that's Marco Rubio. He's been proven to be able to do this. As far as Witkoff goes, Steve Witkoff, he's a real estate guy, but he does have Trump's ear, and he'll report back. But that's it.
So the
He's
most
not going to make.
trusted primarily have been sent out. Of course, in the most senior leadership position is the Vice President J.D. Vance. I have some big news coming in. This is from Iran. Let's take a look at that. Iran's Supreme Leader, Mujtaba Khamenei, who is of course now in charge, has instructed all military units to stop firing. A statement that has been read out on Iran's state broadcaster that our team can confirm that Iran's Supreme Leader Mujtaba Khamenei has instructed all military units to stop firing on an immediate basis. Now, I find this interesting because this is possibly for the first time in the past 40 days. Teresa, I take this to you, that both Iran and the USA, Israel are taking the ceasefire seriously. Otherwise, there were announcements and the firing.
I agree that they are taking the ceasefire seriously. And that's going to be the first test of this next phase in the combat. How long it lasts? Well, I think a good outcome would be if it lasts at least the 2 weeks.
Yes.
It's very easy to imagine circumstances in which it might fall apart, however. That could happen by accident, or it could happen if one side or the other decides that they want to attack something. That's one problem. The second problem is one you've already mentioned, that Iran's ceasefire proposal points are essentially opposite to those of the United States.
Yes.
And Israel has not been heard from on that score. And that is the last thing that's going to get resolved, if it gets resolved. Because this is all part of the negotiating process. And the styles of the American officials and Iranians in negotiation are very different. And even within that contrast, you have President Trump, whose preferred style of negotiating is basically to act as a bully and to impose deadlines and very close, short deadlines in the expectation that the other side will honor those deadlines, which in this case will not happen. The Iranians don't do deadlines in the way that Mr. Trump hopes that they will.
And perhaps that's a realization that has come in on both sides. So to the ones waking up this morning wondering what happened overnight, from a civilization to end tonight, referring to the regime, but also a reflection of what escalation could look like, to coming to a ceasefire for 2 weeks, what exactly unfolded? Now, here's what we are estimating and what we believe from what the information has come in, is Donald Trump agreed clearly to a ceasefire deal, even though 12 hours ago, there were bombardment on the Kharg Island and on the railway tracks. But both sides have accepted Pakistan-backed truce. Iran has formally agreed as well to the ceasefire. So both sides are on the same page, at least when it comes to a temporary truce. Earlier, remember, Iran had said have a permanent ceasefire, not a temporary one. Now, a reflection of that is seen on the markets already. American markets are surging on the news of truce. American forces have halted the offensive. Oil prices are falling. And Mujtaba Khamenei, the Iran supreme leader right now, has also put out a message that all firing needs to stop right away. Professor Sierra, do you think that in the last 12 hours, and I'm giving that timeline because I remember Kharg Island was bombarded about 12 hours ago, when this announcement comes in, is this reflective that they want to sit across the table? Is this reflective that goals have not been achieved? They are not being achieved for the USA? Is this a reflection for Iran to also realize if the USA goes ahead with the escalation, it would be a disaster for their country too?
Yeah, I mean, I think Iran, realized that, which is good, because in the past they've had leaders who weren't willing to admit that or didn't care. In terms of the U.S., I don't think this is a bad thing for the U.S. to say that we got Iran to open the strait, we got them to negotiate a ceasefire, and we're going to be talking with them about their nuclear program in very serious terms. No more talks about that are going nowhere and with people who are lying the whole time they're talking. So I think we've set the expectations, and hopefully the Iranian regime will continue to meet them.
Do you think there would be peace in the next 2 weeks? Do you think diplomacy will work its way here?
I think there's a very good chance that it could. The reason I say that is because Trump's negotiating style, you mentioned the points are opposite. Trump's negotiating style is very tough. And so when he is actually speaking to somebody, which we haven't been able to do, we might see a very positive outcome based on his negotiating style. We don't really know, because we don't know these people who are in charge now. They've been in charge for what, like a week, because their regime keeps getting taken out, the different levels. So we'll have to see.
Teresa Shafa, as a former diplomat yourself, how do you look at how the Trump administration is, or the president himself specifically, vis-a-vis the presidents earlier, from Kennedy's to the Bush parent and son, to Obama, Biden? Many of them have gone to war. How does Donald Trump stand apart from the previous ones? I won't say good or bad, because that could be more subjective, but in terms of how his tone has been, his approach, mixed messaging within hours, statements that are even using expletives, for example.
Well, first of all, Trump's public persona, the face he chooses to put on in public, is very unfiltered.
Yes.
That